I've built a few Gauge 1 live steam locomotives so far. This is the next one I'm going to build, and it's going to be scratch built and it's going to be live steam, and I hope you find the series of following videos interesting to watch. Hello and welcome to part 27 of the Gauge 1 GWR Prairie tank scratch build. And you can see what we're up to. I've got the rear coal bunker section completed, more or less. That's pretty well where we want to be at the moment. And as you notice also, I've fixed these what will be the side tanks. I fixed those on. They're on mounting, they're mounted as well. So let's just take this quickly apart and show you where we're up to and what we're going to do next. So here we are in our basic bits again. And as I mentioned, I've fixed an angle, just some angle along here, so I can fix these side panels with just an angle soldered onto there and screwed on. And with this all now in a permanent position, this now gives me the ability to finally get round to making the water tanks and determine the appropriate size for the water tanks, which is what I will be doing now. You can have an idea of what this water tank will look like. Again, I've made it, got the dimensions from some rough card. This card actually more or less is about the right thickness of it represents the brass that I'll be cutting it out from. So you can see hopefully more or less the dimensions of the water tank. Now, I've mentioned a couple of times is what you've got to think about as you built this is, can you actually make the thing? That is, when you make all the parts, can you fit them all together? And this is what I'm planning now. And I'm thinking about the assembly. And so the last thing we need to do is to paint ourselves into a corner in such a way that we can't put the thing together. So example, that will go on there. Now, we have to consider this boiler cover, because this boiler cover fits over here and is held in position with this bracket. So we're going to make sure that we know how we can assemble the thing. So let's imagine now we've fixed our boiler cover on, we've got our running board on, so the next thing that will be fitted would be the tank. And as I mentioned, the tank will sit about there. There'll be two of them. Now, I've left some gaps here in this area because I'm not quite sure yet in terms of whether I will need to run any pipes out. So that does give me room if I want to take any water feed pipes or anything comes through, it can find its way through underneath this plate. But that's where it's looking as where the water tank will sit. So if I imagine I'm assembling this, so the running board goes on, there'll be the plumbing then for this tank, the tank will drop on, and that will be screwed into position onto any connecting pipes. Then once the tank is on, this will then fit onto here. Now, there's a problem. We can't do that. You can't assemble it that way because you've got no way of screwing this side panel on. So you have to think about it another way. So what it's got to be is the side panel has to go on, and then the water tank drops in. Now if the water tank drops in, how easy is it to actually fit the water tank? Can we physically assemble it that way? And that is what I'm thinking, giving some thought to at the moment. So running board fixed on, side panel fixes on, and then the water tank drops in. I've been having a think about the assembly issues, and I think we have a solution now. I think we've figured out what we have to do. It's clear this is the assembly. The running board goes on this side panel, then the tank, and the tank on the other side, and this will allow me to fit the plumbing. There'll be a pipe runs across here to the other tank for interconnections, and there'll be a pipe that runs out, runs down underneath the chassis, right down to the bottom of this axle pump, and then there will be a pipe that runs along here. So in terms of the assembly, that will all be done first. When that's finished, the boiler and smoke box will go on, like that. So what I've done previously, this firebox cover was fixed onto the chassis. Not possible to do that. So what I've done, I've put a strap around this part of the boiler with a little bush threaded, and that means I can drop the firebox cover on or off for this assembly. So that's what I've done. I've just added a strap here. I put a strap on there so that the firebox cover drops on there. I mean, the firebox cover isn't doing anything as such that it's an integral part of the strength of the locomotive or anything. You've got to think, when you're putting these things together, you've got to think of manufacturability. It's all very well designing this and making all the parts, but you've got to be able to assemble it. So that's the order that it goes together in. We now know that we can assemble the thing, and we now know that this is the dimensions, the size of the water tanks that we're able to make. I've marked the size, the depth that we want to cut to for the start of these tanks. So I will just cut along the line, as they say. We just have to take this steady. Keep as close to this, keeping as close to this line as we can. I mean, ideally, this is where a guillotine comes in really handy. Just finish the end. So there's the first strip. We'll straighten that out later. I will just mark off the material again. Let's check that for the second tank. Just a little tidy up. Just get these two pieces. That's looking okay. Let's get rid of those guys there. There's our two strips and our cardboard template. And there was one thing I forgot to mention before. Is the other thing I also did was I put the valve gear back on as well, because I realised that I want to make sure everything's in place where I'm going to have to feed these pumps around. So I reassembled all this detail as well and connected everything up, just so I know exactly what space is going to be left when I fit these pipes. I'm beginning to think it would benefit from a quick annealing. Take all the spring out. What annealing does, I think I mentioned before, is it sort of rearranges the molecules a little bit and takes the spring out. If this is quite springy at the moment. What that's given me now is a very soft piece of metal that bends and has had the spring taken out of it. So I've put on the vise this V-form. This is quite a useful bit of kit actually. You can buy these V-formers and they fit on magnetically, fit on there, and you can get a nice bend and bring it in. And I can just look at this and watch the bend take place. It's not possible to get the rest of this in those between those bending jaws. You've got to really do the final bit over an angle or something, whatever you want to call it, just to get this final bend. But that's looking okay. And having this annealed has made a big difference in being able to bend this brush sheet. There we are so far, and now what I have to do is really trim a little bit back on here to close it all up. Okay, just finishing off getting these some nice sharp corners. I want these to be as, if you like, tight, sharp as they can, because these have got to come round to marry up. So let's have a look at that. And as you can see now, this corner comes together, and what I'll do next is just pop 2 rivets on there to hold it together, ready to be soldered, up. There's the 2 tanks completed now. It's got the basic shape for them, and so they will fit one on that side and one on that side. And I've made them as wide as I physically dare without them fouling the wheels. Next thing I will do is I will make a base plate for these, get a suitable base plate. That's going to be reasonably a thicker piece of brass. Alright, so that's going to be pretty solid, and this one's going to have to be certainly solid to mount the hand pump in. Right, I've cut the 2 pieces out for the bottom of the tanks, made everything slightly oversized, and the plan is to soft solder these onto the bases now. Get some solder down on the seams, so we can just pop that in the vise. So we'll just run a seam of solder down here, just get some flux. It's going to be soft solder. Just get some flux on here, and we can just melt it in. And I'm just going to hit this from the inside. Okay, with the seams both done down this side, I'm going to start fitting it to the base plate. And I put a big blob of solder on the end, on each end, which I'm going to melt, and hopefully that should grip it while we do the rest of the soldering. Let's light up. And I'm playing most of the heat on this thicker base plate, obviously because it's thicker metal. Give a little bit of heat inside as well. There it goes. Yep, that's fine. I can see the solder has flowed through to the other side. Okay, what I've just done now is, you can see, put a weight on there, and I've just added a few beads of solder along this edge, and I will just repeat the process. Just hope there's enough of a lip on there, enough material just to hold that on. So let's heat it up gently. Oh, it's just about holding now. The solder's starting to melt. The capillary action is starting to take over. There we go. All starting to flow. Just heat this along here, this other edge. And that's starting to flow. I will just run a little bit of flux along there just to flow there. Here we are. That's the basics of one water tank done. Filed up to this edge as close as I dare. So there's still a little bit of seam of solder in there. So now what we can do is actually check and see if the thing leaks, or see if it holds water. Just come back with my water and fill it up. That's about the working depth. And that is looking watertight. Right, so finally moving on, what I've done is made two little outlet connectors for each tank with just a little nut that screws on the end like that. So this will fit on onto the tank. Pop that through there, and then we use our pair of pliers then to hold that to engage on the nut. Alright, just fitting the final outlet pipe. Just nipping this up now. So that's the two tanks mounted. Tighten that up, and that should drop into here. Right, okay, drop them in. I think I've got all my pipes tight now. Drop that in. Let me just nip this up to get the full effect. Right, there's the two tanks mounted, and what we can do now is we can fit this as our cross connection pipe that connects the two together. Slide them across there. This is, I may need to make the pipe a little bit, probably a little bit, it might work, it's a little bit too short, but I don't think it will foul. So there's the two tanks, cross connected now. So just to finish up, they can be filled from any side. I'll probably make the filling just the one side, but we put some water in. Yeah, and what it's also doing, as you would expect, is the other tank is filling from the cross tank as well, from the pipe. Drop some water in there. You can see there, both tanks full and ready to go. So I do hope you've liked this video, you've liked watching this one. Please hit the like button and the subscribe button, as it all helps the channel. So thanks for watching and see you soon.